Welcome to Straight from the Source with Haley Watts. Our guest today is Marti Brown, the city manager for the city of Willows. Marti, thanks so much for coming down, by the way. Coming
Absolutely.
over, I guess, right?
Yeah, right.
So how long have you been with Willows?
It's been about 4.5 years now.
Okay, what brought you to Willows, first of all? Because I know you said you were actually a city council member in Vallejo for one period of your life, right?
Yeah, that was back about 12 years ago now, actually.
Okay.
So, I actually became city manager in Marysville and moved to Marysville, and that was in 2018, and I was there for 2.5 years. And that didn't work out, so I tried some different things and eventually was able to land a position as a city manager in the city of Willows. It's commutable from Marysville, so I still live in Marysville. And
you
I
do?
Commute, yeah.
Wow, okay.
So I commuted up here from there today.
Where do you take, which highway do you take? I'm trying to think. Do you go up 99?
I go across on 20,
Okay.
and then across Maxwell Road, and then up on I-5.
There's one great thing about our area, and I always say this, there's no traffic anywhere. So even if it's a drive, it's not a bad drive.
Yeah, I'm originally from the Bay Area, so you're right. I agree. There's no traffic.
Yes.
And so much of it is like 2/3 of that community is a country highway. So,
you
know, the winter's beautiful with the geese and ducks, and the, all the rice fields are filled with water. It's really beautiful.
That's so pretty.
It's not a difficult commute at all.
Tell me about your experience just with like the people of Willows and the community, being someone who's not originally from the area. You've lived in bigger cities. What's the vibe like of that community?
Well, it's a small town, and everybody kind of knows everybody, and a lot of people have lived there their whole lives, and so it's a very tight-knit community, and I think, it is challenging to break into that. I think that being out in the community more, and more recently, about 2-3 years ago, I joined Rotary, and that, that kind of helped with getting to know people in a setting that's not just like at a council meeting where, it's very formal, right? Or making an appointment to see me and speak with me.
Right.
So I think that has really helped a lot in terms of just getting out in the community and getting to know people better. This weekend, like I mentioned, we'll be at Lamb Derby.
Yes.
And so, getting out there in different community events also helps to get to know people better. But yeah, I think that people are used to people that they've known most of their lives. And so it's a little bit challenging to make some inroads, but after 4.5 years, I think it's not as difficult maybe as it was when I first started to make those inroads, because now I've been here long enough.
Yeah, okay. Now, we have to talk about the Lamb Derby, right? What is the Willows connection with lamb or sheep, or how did the Derby get started? What's the deal?
Well, I don't have to say I don't know the full history. I might have to have somebody else be on the podcast for that. But historically, my understanding is there were lambs in the greater Willows area, and it started at the time when there were people, farming and herding lamb and all raising them, all that kind of thing. But over time, the agriculture has shifted in Glenn County, and so there's a lot less of that. In fact, I'm not even sure if there are any
sheep herders.
I'm not really sure that there are any at this point, because it's so much of it is rice and orchards at this point. And I think a lot less livestock than there was maybe 25 or 30 years ago.
So if
but the traditions continued on.
Right, the tradition continues, and if someone's never been and they're thinking of driving their family out to the Lamb Derby, what can they expect?
Well, there will be a lot of lamb available to eat. There is definitely that.
Live ones too, though, right?
I believe so. Yeah, there's the parade. There's also there's a pageant show for the Lamb Derby Queen.
Okay.
And so there's that, there's the parade, and then there's booths and a lot of food and music, and that's kind of it for the day. On Saturday, it's pretty much an all-day event until from about 8:39 in the morning. The parade's at 10, and it'll go till about 4 o'clock.
Okay, so being a transplant, you're here in the city of Willows now. It's not the first time you've been a city manager, and also you were a city councilor before. So for people who don't really understand how their own local cities work, the city council is essentially the boss, right? But then you are tasked with managing the city. They make a decision, right? They vote on something, and you have to make sure it's carried out appropriately, and you're responsible for that?
Correct. I often, for people who aren't familiar, equate it to a board of directors of a corporation, and the council is kind of like the board of directors. And then the city manager is like the CEO, chief executive officer, and it's my job to implement their policies after they voted and taken action on them.
Okay.
And that's kind of the relationship. I report directly to the city council, as does the city attorney. And then everybody else, except for the city attorney, basically reports up through my structure and up through my position.
So we've seen in other cities and counties, we've seen boards of supervisors or city councils sometimes vote on things or make a decision or enact an ordinance that might be challenging to carry out, whether it's like, oh, does this align with state law, or just logistically, hey, they voted on this, but we don't know if it makes sense. Have you, in your experience, had to deal with anything like that, where it's like, how do I carry this out?
You know, I can't think of anything, because I think typically what ends up happening is that if those scenarios happen where either it's against state law or logistically or financially it's not feasible, it may initially get passed, but then, you know, staff, myself, will have to come back and explain to the council, you know, actually we can't do this because of XYZ. Usually we've done our homework beforehand and shared with the council why we aren't able to do something, and so that the legal option isn't usually something that comes up. Sometimes something might be financially not as feasible as we thought it would be, and so then we have to come back to the council and explain, like, here's the financial situation. I don't think that we're going to be able to do this because of XYZ, and explain to the council and the public why that might not work, and that we might have to make some adjustments. Maybe we could do a portion of what you're asking for, or maybe we have to do it in phases, because, you know, the finances just aren't going to allow us to do all of it at once.
Right.
There's been, for example, the police department we talked about earlier, there's been a strong interest in getting that started, but one of the things we've been challenged by is the initial startup costs, you know, buying cars and buying weapons and the building, and, you know, now we've, you know, since the city dissolved its police department, we're starting over. So now things aren't grandfathered in. We have to follow state law in terms of our facility and our information technology and security and all those things that maybe before we didn't have to, because we were grandfathered in and we'd had a police department since the beginning of time. And now, because we don't, we're now under, you know, new state law, basically. So that, looking at that and initially thinking, okay, there's a strong interest to get started, but where do we begin?
Yeah.
Because the cost of all of that is going to be astronomical.
Right.
And so trying to figure that out. So initially, you know, there was a strong interest, and then, you know, the more we talked about it and thought it through, we realized, like, well, we could leverage our sales tax or leverage some other financing options, like what we brought to the council last week, which was a Melrose Community Facilities District.
Okay. And so you and I were talking about this. I feel very educated about the Melrose Community Services District, more so than I was an hour ago. But just to explain it to listeners here, this is something that would essentially, like, a community service district operates sort of as like a financing agency?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So you basically, there would be, we would define exactly how we're going to set up the taxing structure.
Yeah.
But it would basically be on property taxes. But there's lots of different ways you can do it. It isn't necessarily it doesn't have to necessarily just be a straight tax. It could be, maybe we want to structure it based on the size of people's properties, and so different people pay different amounts, or based on linear frontage on your street frontage, or there's different ways that you can decide to structure the tax, which we have not gotten to yet. So if you ask me, I won't be able to answer. We're going to have to go through that process. But it isn't necessarily just like a straight property tax. We're just like, oh, it's based on the value of your property. It's not based on the value of your property. It's based on the value of the service that you're trying to provide and what you're trying to pay for. And then how you want to structure that based on different size properties, or, like I said, different road frontage, or the heights of buildings on the property.
Right.
There's all sorts of options there that we're going to be looking at as we go through this process.
Okay, so I understand how that would be needed to kind of like generate this new revenue to pay for this new service. But I mean, it seems like something, when you think of a city, something as basic as law enforcement, as a police department, like, couldn't you just say, hey, we're going to allocate this percentage of the budget to it?
You could, except that most of our general fund is pretty much spoken for, and even with the sales tax that passed in 2024, that was a 1.5% sales tax. We're projected, and we're on target to bring in about an additional $2.1 million a year, but we had a $1.4 million structural deficit going into that tax. And so now we filled the deficit. That's great, but, you know, basic math tells you that's $600,000 or $700,000 left of surplus funds. And I mean, as we know, everywhere, no costs are etched in stone, right? I mean,
Right.
everything's going up all the time,
Yes.
salaries and the cost of gas and living and groceries and all that. It's no different for a city. All of our contracts, all of those things incrementally, and salaries and pensions and health insurance, they all go up incrementally over time. So that $600,000 or $700,000 that's surplus today looks good today,
Yeah.
but 5 years from now, will we still have the same? Probably not.
Okay.
So we're thinking and planning for that as well.
What is the current annual fee for the contract with the sheriff's office, and when does it end officially, or is it over?
No, it ends June 30th,
Okay,
2026, and the current contract is $2,355,000.
Okay, so more than $2 million per year is what they're getting.
It has gone up every year in the 3
Gotcha.
years that we've had a new contract. It was a
Okay.
5-year contract from 2017 to 2022, and that just had a built-in CPI escalator, Consumer Price Index, so
Sure.
just general inflation of 2 or 3%.
Okay.
That was built in for the 5 years, and then that ended, and we have a new sheriff since then, and we negotiated a new contract, and that had bigger jumps in it that were not just simply a
Sure.
CPI increase. And
So is 2.3 million, that's not enough to just, hey, we take this and let's just run our own police department?
I think initially it's something like that around there, 2.3 to 2.5 will be. But again, the startup cost to get there, because right
it.
now we have nothing. We have no
Right.
guns, no
They're
cars.
not going to give you cars in a building.
Right, exactly.
Got
And the I mean, I sit in the former police department, so I can tell you that
There's-
that we would have to do tenant improvements and completely our side of the hall is City Hall, because on one side is the library and on the other side
Right.
is City Hall. And that's administration, finance, and community development. I mean, that would have to be all kind of carved out, and there would have to be tenant improvements to
Yeah.
make room for the police department and move some of us to other places. Also, IT, information technology and security for PD is much different than just regular City Hall
Right.
services, and so that's more costly. Typically with the police department, also, your legal fees go up.
Yeah.
And that's something that also has to be considered that we don't have to consider right now.
Got it.
So those kinds of things, I think that we definitely need the initial startup costs, but over time, I don't think that, as costs increase and that $600,000 to $700,000 of surplus we have today because of the sales tax, I don't think that that will be enough long-term
Okay.
to sustain the city and law enforcement.
Yeah.
And then also, we have the fire department, which is, has very expensive apparatus. I mean,
Yeah.
their vehicles, we're getting ready to buy an engine 2 right now, and that's going to be about $1.5 million, $1.5, $1.6 million.
Just for the engine?
Correct.
Wow.
Yeah. So financing that and getting some grant money and general fund money,
Yeah.
it's piecing together lots of different financing, different kinds of financing mechanisms.
Yeah.
And so we're in the middle of doing that now. But, fire departments constantly need new apparatus. I mean, that's something
Right.
that you cycle through all the time, and they're just not inexpensive.
Yeah.
So possibly building that into the community facilities district is something the council's also discussing, is whether or not we want part of that CFD and sort of the scope of what the CFD provides might include some aspect for fire as well for their ongoing expenses, because it is, their fire engines cost a lot more than a police department car.
Right.
So,
Right, for sure.
so making sure that we can sustain that long term is something that we're also looking at.
And so Willows Fire Department, I mean, that's city fire, right? It's not a contract with CAL FIRE or anything like that. Is it volunteer at all, or are these paid employees?
So it is hugely volunteer,
Okay.
but there is a paid a paid fire chief and 3 fire captains. And then, so there's always one on every shift, 24/7, one paid career staff on every shift. And then the fire chief also works regular days like an administrator, like
Sure.
a department head, but he also fills in when there's people are out sick or on vacation. He's also backfilling for the fire captains. And then when there's an emergency call, a 911 call, the career staff immediately sounds the alarm to all the volunteers. There's
Yeah.
about 50 volunteers. Whoever's available, they usually have some agreement with their employer or they're self-employed, and if they're able, they drop what they're doing and they come to a fire, structure
Yeah.
fire or something.
Does it just blow your mind that people volunteer to do a really dangerous job, deprives you of sleep? I mean, people just step up and do it because it has to be done, I guess?
Yes, that is true. It has to be done if you're going to structure your fire department this
Yeah.
way. But across the country, more and more people, fewer and fewer people are volunteering, and it is becoming an issue in different communities about whether you can get enough volunteers, because because not everybody can come to every fire.
Yeah.
So you need a big enough pool so that there's room for who can and who can't come to a structure fire.
Well, and it's like these people who are going to be a volunteer firefighter, it couldn't just be anybody, right? You have to go through training, you have to have some sort of qualifications or experience or something. And so we need a certain type of person. But then also I think that people are retiring later and later because everything's so expensive, and you don't really have, if you're still working into your 60s and 70s, do you really have time to be a volunteer for your community?
I mean, some people love it and keep doing it, but it's true. Things happen in people's lives, regardless of their age, where maybe they were able to have more flexibility, and then they start a family, and now they have kids, and they can't do as much as they could, and so they need to back away. Maybe they'll come back later. We have people that have backed away and then come back later when things change in their personal life. But it is a tremendous commitment, because it isn't just getting initial training, it's ongoing training. I mean, they have training, volunteers have training at least once a month, and lots of other special training in between, because you've got to keep that skill set up. You've got to be ready to respond.
And it's funny, because I was just making this assumption that, the volunteers are like retired firefighters or police officers, but no, these are a lot of working people with families, with other jobs and other things, and they just say, hey, I'm going to leave my cell phone on in the middle of the night in case there's an emergency.
Right. I mean, some people, I would say there's a fair number, I think, that are self-employed, like they're either farmers or, so there's flexibility in their, or they have some sort of their own business that allows for that flexibility. I think there's a fair number of those volunteers. But yes, that's absolutely correct what you just said. I mean, they're willing to be ready and available in the middle of the night or, in the middle of the day.
Is there like some sort of tax write-off or is there like any sort of benefit or payback to compensate, or is it just the sense of doing good?
Well, I mean, there is, if you're a volunteer firefighter with the Willows Fire Department, I believe for 10 years or more, there is a small kind of little mini pension that you get of like $100 a month or something when you retire. It's like, it's very small. Under state law, volunteer firefighters are also covered by workers' comp. So if you get hurt, you are covered by workers' comp, and that's state law. But no, not a lot. You're right.
Wow, okay. So the city, financially, let's talk about how finances are, because I know obviously you need, if you want to buy new things, you need to find a source of money. But is the budget balanced right now?
Oh yeah, yes it is.
Things are looking good.
Yes, it is a balanced budget. We do have surplus funding. Right now about $500,000 or $600,000 of surplus funding for this coming fiscal year that we're looking ahead. But I mean, typically you want our general fund budget with the new sales tax is a little over $7 million. You want, in a small city where there's deferred maintenance usually, and any kind of crisis could happen, you want like a 30% reserve. We're in good shape now, but it's not like we're going to go out and have Friday night block parties every week either. You know what I mean? We still have to be conservative and careful.
Yeah, okay. When you hear from people in the community, what are some of the bigger concerns? I mean, are people worried about potholes? Is homelessness an issue?
I would say the bigger concerns are code enforcement. We hear a lot about frustration around our code enforcement. We try to be as active and focused on that as we can. I think also our roads and streets and sidewalks are not at the level that people would like to see them in terms of repair and improvement. So that's something that we're always working on. But again, those things are very expensive to, just like a small half a block of road, if you have to completely rip it up and redo it, can be easily over $1 million for a half a block. So, we definitely have streets that all over the city that really could use more than just filling potholes, really need serious repairs, and the same thing with our sidewalks. So those are a couple of things. I think there's also been an increased concern, as we were talking about police, law enforcement, public safety, and an increased concern around wanting to make sure that we have the law enforcement services for the community, on a daily, regular basis, and that resource and that service is there when people call 911. And I think there is some level of concern and interest in that, which leads back to the desire to start our own police department.
What are, like, when we talk about public safety, like, are we talking about retail theft, break-in entering? Are there violent crimes reported in Willows, or is it people outside coming in, or just, I mean, what are you seeing?
I think that it's a lot more. I mean, the one thing I hear a lot of complained about is just speeding, and that there's nobody like monitoring, how, speeding and running stop signs. And I mean, not that long ago, we had somebody who looks like probably maybe ran a stop sign and somebody got killed.
Yeah.
And so, so that is a real safety issue. I think that there is a little bit of a mix of both sort of outside people coming in, because sometimes we've had gunshots at, Black Bear Diner before, where,
right.
And they were from out of town and they just got off the freeway, and then you don't really know the backstory.
So you're pretty close to I-5, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a little bit of that happens once in a while, but there's also, there's drug problems in the county, and I think that there's also some other internal issues as well around crime and law enforcement. I wouldn't say that it's like huge, it's not like a huge. If you look at the call volume for the sheriff's department, it's not like, they're getting a 911 call, every 10 minutes or anything like that. But I just think that, when you have like the accident I mentioned, it really brings to people's mind and puts on their radar the issue of like speeding and safety for children and, safe routes to schools. And it's scary when somebody accidentally, runs a stop sign and kills somebody, right?
Yeah,
and then you're
for
like,
sure.
Why isn't anybody watching out for these things, right?
You know what's an interesting thing, that you have a unique opportunity, right? So if you do rebuild the police department from scratch, like, you're seeing all these new technologies with artificial intelligence or just new tech, right? Like Chico PD recently has done the red light cameras. Reading Police have done that as well. In response to the fact that people say people are running red lights everywhere. They're complaining about that. And so that was some idea to do that. You're seeing some police departments implement like robotic canines, right?
Mm-hmm.
Drones.
Oh, yeah,
and to a certain degree in place of a certain number, like instead of having 60 officers, maybe we have 50 and we have some robotic dogs and drones.
Right.
Do you think that will be part of the conversation of like, when we rebuild, do we do things a little bit differently?
Yes, I think it definitely, I think it'll have to be part of that. We really have to be cost effective and efficient as possible. And I do think as technology is changing, the city really needs to try to keep up with that as much as possible, especially if it brings cost savings to the city. We really need to be working on that. One thing that we looked at previously that, may come back as a conversation at some point was also, because in Southern California, there are police departments that are contracting with private security. And so I actually, a couple of years ago, when we first were starting to have this conversation, went on a trip to LA and actually went and toured a Covered Six, a private security that provides security to Beverly Hills and some other cities, and did a ride-along with a security guard in Beverly Hills and kind of learned more about the partnership. And one of the things that I found really intriguing was I was in the Beverly Hills Police Department where all the cameras are that you were talking about. Beverly Hills has something like over 30,000 cameras in the city limits. And it's not a huge, the geography is not huge.
Right.
But they were showing me how they had a car chase because they have a lot of carjackings with gangs from South America and other places, and how the cameras assisted in capturing people who were like checking out a house and carjacked a house somewhere in Beverly Hills and got on the road, and all the cameras, and how they were able to track with 30,000 cameras in the city, just keeping track of where they were and able to track them down and get them. So I think, like, speaking, going back to the technology we're talking about, but also having like, a level of maybe private security is a thing.
Right.
I mean, I think we have to think about that because not every situation requires a sworn officer and that level of training necessarily. I mean, some of the things I just mentioned to you that the community wishes there was more of. I mean, do we need a sworn officer to help with speeding cars? Right? Some of the things that maybe are kind of like more like code enforcement.
Sure.
Probably not.
Right.
So finding the sweet spot of where we really need that highly skilled officer for really serious crime versus other kinds of quality of life issues that the community wants to see addressed, but maybe we don't need a sworn officer for.
Right.
And so I think more and more cities are trying to figure out what that looks like
Right.
and build relationships. And most police departments really don't like the idea of private security coming in at any level.
Yeah.
Beverly Hills Police Department was very resistant when it first happened. And now they've really seen a value over time. And now the private security, they didn't want them to have radios. Now they have radios. And they have seen how, as long as the private security only steps in if they're asked to, like basically that's the relationship, they show up at a scene and they're just more bodies on the periphery while the police are doing their work.
Right.
And if something gets out of hand and a police officer asks for help, they'll help. But otherwise, it's just showing force. And sometimes that can de-escalate a situation, is what I learned when I did that ride-along.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting.
I mean, there seems like there would be a ton of benefits to this. And then one thing you didn't even mention is potentially like not putting the burden of paying a pension on the taxpayers, right?
Right.
Because it's like, it's such a tough issue, because you think of somebody who gives their life to a job, like being the risks of being in law enforcement. And I love the idea that as a reward, you get to retire comfortably, right?
Sure,
and not have to suffer
absolutely.
and struggle as a 70-year-old.
Right.
But it's like, is that sustainable for taxpayers to keep paying someone else's salary who's retired and hire their replacement, and then it's just, we're
Right.
in over our heads. And so it seems like with the private security, any sort of retirement plan, that would be on the company that employs them theoretically.
Right.
'Cause we just have the partnership.
It's just a contract with
Yeah,
them, basically.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
correct, yeah. And I think that, this very issue of separating out what you need a sworn officer and that really high-level, highly skilled officer to do versus the other kinds of quality of life issues people want addressed and often end up in the police department's wheelhouse, but it's not really the same as like intense high-level crime, right?
Yeah.
With people with guns. I think that concept and that concern actually was brought to me when I was a council member in Vallejo. I had a constituent who came to me and said, look, I want those people there that are highly skilled to fight really serious crime. We need them. But I don't want them also to be doing things that somebody who is less trained and costs us less could do. I don't want them
Right.
out ticketing cars on the street. That should be somebody else's job. Let's keep the highly skilled people for the really dangerous jobs that they
Right.
get paid for. And so we started having that conversation. Of course, at the time, Vallejo was in bankruptcy when I was on the council, but we did start having that dialogue. But that was a concept that stayed with me even as I left office and went on to become a city manager, about how is it in public safety that we make sure that we're really deploying our resources appropriately based on the types of crimes and the quality of life issues,
Yeah.
and not paying people huge salaries and pensions to give a ticket to a car that's illegally on the street
Sure.
for 3
Okay.
days.
Right. Homelessness. I don't think I've ever seen like a homeless camp in Willows. I haven't spent a ton of time there, but it doesn't seem to be a big problem when you're walking out and about downtown area. What are you observing?
It is not a problem the way it is in Chico, or it
Yeah.
has been historically
Yeah,
in
yeah.
Chico at all. That is correct. We have had issues in the past with homeless squatting in like vacant buildings, so we have some of that for sure. We also have a place on the south end of town called the Bamboo that actually is near. It's in the right of way of the railroad, and we're actually getting ready to clear that out and actually level the Bamboo, so there's not a
Oh.
place to hang out and
Is it
hide.
like an old hotel or something? Or?
No, it's literally a grove of bamboo.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
The bamboo.
Yeah, it literally is bamboo.
Yeah.
And it's really thick and it's huge and it's easy to be in there and hide
Yeah.
out and camp out and stuff like that. And so that has actually really very recently become quite a bit worse and grown. And so we're trying to work with the railroad and other county services and offices to try to help those people find other places to live, but also getting ready to clear out all the garbage and debris and then level the bamboo and probably burn it down so that it's not a place that people could easily go hide out in.
Sure.
But that and some of the illegal squatting that we've had over the 4.5 years I've been with the city are the main thing. But it's really like we're talking dozens of people, not hundreds.
Right.
Yeah.
That's good. Is it difficult, like who handles that sort of thing from the city? Because you don't have the police department. Would it be like asking the sheriff's office, or is it Public Works?
It's really a team effort, actually. It's working together. So a lot of times it's our code enforcement officer Sometimes if there's a fire danger component, the fire chief and the code enforcement officer together. It's also getting county services. If you're looking for services for homeless people, then there's a whole bunch of social services you want the county to be involved in. It might also engage environmental health if there's environmental health concerns as well. And then sometimes with the sheriff might come if there is, like, especially with illegal squatters in a building, to help remove them if they're not cooperating and leaving, or if a code enforcement officer or fire chief would like an escort because you don't know what you're walking into, and if you're walking into a space that's a building with squatters that's empty and they might have weapons, and so sometimes you ask for a police escort. So, you know, it just depends on every situation's different, and it's definitely you know, a collective concerted effort. In each situation, we evaluate what we need for resources.
Right, that makes sense. So there are some, when you mention squatters, I'm assuming that means there are buildings, whether they're businesses or homes, that are vacant, right? Is there a problem, like, with keeping, especially in the business district, keeping businesses full, keeping people in business there? Do you have, like, empty storefronts that you're dealing with?
Yes, there are definitely empty commercial buildings in Willows. And I mean, yeah, it is a challenge. I mean, the population of the town has been roughly around 6,200 for quite some time.
It's not growing.
Hasn't grown really too much. No, yeah. I believe actually over the last 20 years, maybe it's gone down even like 100 people or 80 people a little bit. So that is challenging. On the other hand, there's not a whole lot of housing stock either to choose from. I mean, it's, you know, you have maybe 5 to 10 houses on the market at any given time.
Interesting.
And they go pretty quickly. I mean,
nobody's building like apartment complexes or anything?
Not
it
right
wouldn't make
now.
sense right now.
No, I mean, a lot of the places where there's lots to do it, like especially in South Willows, you know, it would be green. You'd have, you know, it's green development, so you'd have to do all this underground infrastructure, roads, utilities. That's really costly, and most developers want grant money or state or federal money or local money to help offset the cost, or else the project won't pencil.
Right.
So we've had Basin Street has been in South Willows for several years. They've owned property probably for 15 years now, and have looked for, you know, they've been looking for opportunities to develop it with housing stock and commercial and light industry. And the main big project that I'm sure you're aware of was a few years ago, the Rumiano cheese development down in South Willows, which is now Masters Food Gallery, which purchased from Rumiano. That is the last big project that came out of sort of this Basin Street property sale. So there's some other irons in the fire right now, and we're hopeful that, you know, something will transpire. But again, the infrastructure development and the costs of that down there are really costly. It's really challenging financially.
I mean, the people who, because say the population stayed roughly the same for a very long time, do you feel like the people who live in Willows are like generational, like people, they grow up there, this is where my parents raised me and this is where I want to raise my family? Or are you seeing transplants come in, especially after COVID or the campfire?
I definitely think a lot of people are generational. I mean, there's a lot of the employees at the City of Willows that have been there, you know, their whole lives, are related to other people in town, you know, and I'm aware of that. So I think there's definitely some generational living going on there, housing, and people that are staying in the community for sure. Yeah. But I do think new people are also coming. I mean, I know somebody on the Rotary who came a few years ago. I know our former labor negotiator had just purchased a house and moved down from, I think, Reading just like 2 years ago. So I do think that, you know, there's also people coming to town. I mean, Willows is really a charming rural environment, and if you want something that's a little bit slower paced, where you know everybody, when you walk into a restaurant or you go into the post office, that's the kind of town Willows is. I mean, I just sent an article to the council that a contractor, actually from that private security company, sent me over the weekend and said, hey, I don't know if you saw this, but there was this really nice article about the museum and things to do on I-5, and you should stop by in Willows in this magazine called Islands. And so I sent that to the council and I put it on our Facebook page. But, you know, and it just talks about like some of the things, some of the qualities of a smaller town. And I think a lot of people increasingly are looking for that. A little slower pace, a little less expensive, right? I mean, you know, the person that I know from Rotary that moved out here moved from closer into the Bay Area. You know, it's going to be less expensive up here. Right. So I think more and more people who are trying to stay in California are looking for places with that slower pace and more affordability, and just where you know everybody.
I know the
That's
kindness
really appealing.
of it, right? Like I always, when I moved to Chico initially, I thought I was going to end up back home because my family's down in Southern California, and every time I visit, I just think it's like the strangest thing. Like we'll be in the park and I smile at a stranger, and they look at me like I'm a crazy person. And it's like Chico's a much bigger city than Willows, but it's still kind of like has that small town vibe where people are kind to one another and they like their neighbors. And I mean, there's nothing like it. It's hard to imagine. It's hard to imagine living.
I mean,
any
I
other
have
way.
family in the Bay Area, and I grew up part of my childhood in the Bay Area and the other part in Western Massachusetts. And it definitely is different. Even Marysville. I mean, I at one point between Marysville and Willows, I had a job for a short time as a general manager of a special district in the Bay Area. And I was really excited about it and it was right next to Berkeley. And I was kind of looking forward to this idea of getting back to the Bay Area and closer to my family. And really quickly, I realized that I was working remotely mostly, but 2 days a week I'd go down and stay at my sister's house and work in the office 2 days and then work remotely back in Marysville. And like when Tuesday, that was like Monday, Tuesday, when Tuesday afternoon came and it was time to go home, I couldn't wait to go back to Marysville. Because it just felt like, especially after COVID, it just felt so congested and there's just a lot of people and you feel a little bit leery about it and I don't want to sit in a crowded restaurant. And, I just found myself in the highway and the congestion and looking for parking. I was like, this isn't really what I thought it was going to be or how I remembered it was going to, it might be. And so I just looked forward to getting back to Marysville where there's like no traffic and no problem finding parking and things are more affordable and going out for dinner with a friend. It doesn't cost an arm and a leg like it does in the Bay Area. I mean, it's just the quality of life I really quickly realized was just not quite how I remembered it or what I thought it was going to be.
Hey, since you brought up restaurants, if somebody was just making a pit stop in Willows, what's the one place that they have to eat, they have to stop by?
Oh, you're putting me in a really hard position to say that. I mean, I think there's a lot of good places. I mean, Red 88 and CB Kitchen and Sakura Japanese. Those are some places. Casa Ramos, Mexican food. I think Alita's. Maybe I'm not kidding. I haven't been there in a long time, but another Mexican restaurant in town.
Favorites?
Yeah. So I think those are some good places to go and check things out, and they're very popular in town.
So one last thing I wanted to ask you about was the Sites Reservoir. Would that, if and when it's built, will that affect Willows at all?
I think a little bit, but I think it's a little bit far away.
Actually,
I mean, I've only been really in one meeting to talk about Sites Reservoir with the county administrator and another consultant that's working on the project. And, looking at where it is on a map, I mean, I think that there will be some initial interest during the building where, I could see an increase in the hotels going up. You know what I mean? And people coming into town and eating for lunch if they're, working on the site or something or staying there for a week or so in a hotel. But, I mean, once it's built, like I sort of see that as maybe like a short-term bump in terms of growth. But I don't really think there's going to be this huge shift. I mean, maybe we'll see people who are working there and want to live in Willows and want that commute because it's maybe 30 minutes away or something.
But like the water storage itself is not going to positively or negatively impact water users in Willows.
No, we have Cal Water as our water provider, and we're in good shape
and
with
really,
them.
People don't have domestic wells for the most part, right? They mostly use Cal Water?
They mostly use Cal Water unless you get outside of the city limits. When you're out in Glenn County, of course, people do have wells.
Different story.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Marti, before I let you go, just for people who've never been to Willows before, we talked about restaurants, but just any key takeaways that, you think people should know about that community?
Well, I think that the community is really friendly, and it's the downtown is a cute downtown that is worth taking a stroll through and eating at one of those restaurants I mentioned. A couple of them are right there in the downtown. There's a charming museum to go to. Willows is really centrally located to other activities too, like the Sacramento National Wildlife Refuge. It's 2 miles down the road. We're the gateway to the Mendocino National Forest. Thunder Hill Raceway is just 3 miles outside of town. I mean, there's a lot of reasons to come and spend some time in Willows while you do some of these other things in the area. So I think that, And if you're just looking for something a little bit slower pace of life and, want to just kind of relax, I think it's a great town to spend some time in.
Okay. Marti Brown, thank you so much. Thanks for being here.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening today. I decided to offer this podcast after enough of you let me know that you wanted a deeper dive into certain stories than you get on our TV broadcasts. We elect certain people to represent our voice, but who are they really? My hope is that this podcast answers that question. I love your feedback, and I want to know who you'd like to hear from next. Just fill out that comment section and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or Spotify.